we're gonna get started on this. Again, we're gonna take a little bit of time, cut up all that lard here in this bag, and we're gonna get this set on our simmer burner. This is a really heavy Dutch oven, and I want something with a pretty thick, heavy bottom on it, so that this has less of a chance to scorch. Because you do not want this to scorch. You want to do this really low and really slow so that it doesn't burn and you don't have a real strong taste.
Alright, so you'll see me start to cut this piece of fat up, and you'll see me cut it up pretty little, and that is because you want these pieces to be pretty small. Ideally, I would have caught my bag of fat while it was still half thawed or half frozen, and I would have ran it through my grinder. Unfortunately, I got distracted with other things and I did not get it run through the grinder, so hopefully we can do that again. We can do that together with a different bag of fat. I know I've got more someplace, but so since I didn't get to grind it, you're gonna see me cutting it up pretty little here, and that is so that we get the most out of this fat that we do have. And while I'm cutting this up, I actually have just a little bit of last year's lard melting in that big Dutch oven over a really low heat. And the reason that I start with a little bit of lard in my Dutch oven is to reduce the chances of this stuff burning when I put it into my Dutch oven. And again, all this is done over a really low heat.
Alright, so you can see we've got all of our fat pieces cut up, and maybe if I tip this just a little bit, it's really not too hot, but you can see how it's becoming liquidy here. That's what we're going for. So we're going really slow on a really low heat, and we're just letting all that fat melt. I chose to use this cast iron, this Dutch oven, because it is still fairly new, and so this actually works to help kind of season it a little bit too. So we are just going to let this keep going. Again, we're on a really low heat, and we're just going to keep letting it cook down and be really patient with it. So maybe you can see here that this is cooking down really nice. You can see all of that liquid lard in there. And so I just keep giving this a good stir every once in a while. We're still on really low heat, and we're just going to let that keep going. Over here we have dinner started, almost done. It is almost ready. We're excited about that, but we are going to keep letting this fat cook down, so that way it can keep going low and slow and it doesn't scorch and we don't end up with a really strong pork taste. Alright, you can see this is really cooking down now. We are making good headway here. Oh, get that in the frame, huh? Making good headway. See all that liquid in there? That's good. So we're going to keep letting this cook down. So I was always taught that when you can see these little bubbles coming up right here, that is similar to putting a piece of bacon on a hot pan, and you know how it sits and it spits? That's what I was always told is an indication of moisture. And since we don't want moisture in this, because moisture is what causes fat to go bad, we want this just to be pure lard. So we are going to allow this to keep cooking down until we really don't see these bubbles coming up anymore. I don't know if that's the correct way or not. That's just what I had always been taught and what I have always kind of gone off of when I make my lard. So that's that. As you can see on the side here, we've got lots of liquid starting in here now. So that's a good thing. We're going to keep letting it go. Now you can see we're really starting to make some headway. You can see how much those little pieces have melted down. You can see how much fat we've got sitting on top here. So during this rendering process here, tends to be a little long and it is a little slow, but you can see we still got bubbles coming. So I am going to let this go longer yet. But I just wanted to give you a quick update what we had going on here. So now you can see how much more still this is. There are still a couple of bubbles coming up. But I am quite happy with this. So we are going to move on and we are going to skim our cracklings out of here. And we are going to get this poured into some jars, get some lids on them, and let them get solidified overnight. So here you can see just how much smaller these fat pieces are than they were when we threw them in there. They have rendered down really well. We are going to have a good amount of lard out of here, and these little cracklings are delicious. I think I told my husband that I was going to make my cuts bigger this year so that we'd have bigger pieces to snack on, but don't waste those. I'm just going to strain this through something. Ideally you would have like a cheesecloth to run this through, but I currently don't have a cheesecloth on hand, so we are just going to use the finest mesh strainer we have, and that will just have to do for today. But ideally you would want this warm, well not warm, but hot, and you'd want to put them into warm jars, put your lid on it in your ring, and then as it cools it would vacuum seal and pop. We're not canning this, so it's not going to be necessarily shelf stable like it would be if you ran it through a canner. What we're doing is we are creating a vacuum to limit the amount of air movement to prolong its shelf life. Since we didn't have a cheesecloth, that is what got through the that little fine mesh strainer. So I am not going to put this in the jars. I'm just going to pour this into, I have a bacon grease cup that I keep in the fridge, and that's what I use to season my cast iron with and cook with and whatnot. And so that's where I'm going to put this, because then I don't worry so much about the little bits in the bottom. So whenever I make bacon, this is where I dump my grease. And so I'm just going to put the rest of this in here. Need a spatula. I think I've seen some people say that before they put their bacon grease in their bacon grease cups that they strain it. That's never been something I have done, nor did I ever watch my mom or my grandma do that with their bacon grease cups. But if that is something that suits you better, then that is just fine. But we tend to choose convenience around here. And sometimes it's easier just to pour it in. And so there we have it. We have 2 pints worth of our freshly rendered down lard. Now we're going to let those sit at least overnight, and when we touch back in with you, they should turn from that beautiful golden color to that really pretty white that we're looking for. It might not be as white as something you're used to seeing in the store, and it might have a little bit, I would expect a little bit of a pork smell. Not something drastically overwhelming, and definitely not off-putting or something that doesn't smell quite right, but it will probably have a little bit of a pork smell, is what I typically expect, or what we typically notice.
Guys, this was a late night. We started cutting up this fat around 2 o'clock in the afternoon, and as you'll see in a second, it was nearing 11 o'clock when I got these jars with the lids and the rings on, but that's okay. Sometimes we gotta have late nights.
I don't think we really talked about what the process of rendering is, and it is the slow melting down of a fat, be it beef tallow or pork lard. Some people even do it with like bear fat. So, and it's rendering down that fat, and it's removing any excess moisture from the fat so that you're left with just pure fat. Which is what the lard is. That's what this end product is. So it's getting rid of that impurities that might be there, be it excess pieces of flesh or, like we had said before, moisture. So when we're rendering lard, that is the goal, is to get just a pure end product that is just fat without any impurities in it or things that might make it go rancid. Alright guys, so it has been just about 12 hours since we poured these into our jars last night after we strained it, and as you can see, they are a beautiful white now. And if we take off one of these rings and hold it by our lid, it did vacuum. So this hasn't been canned. It is not preserved in the same way that, say, something pressure canned has been preserved. It has just been vacuumed. So now there won't be any air movement, which air and liquid moisture is what causes fat to go bad. So these are ready to be dated. Check our seal on that one. You can see I can't pull it off with just my fingers. So these are ready to be dated and to go into storage. I know they say that fat like this is shelf stable, and I do have some down on my shelves as is, because it's cool down there and it is dark in our pantry. So if you can find a cool, dark place, you can keep these on your shelf. My parents always kept theirs in their freezer, and so that's what I have a habit of doing with the majority of my lard, even though it is sealed. So if you want to keep it on your pantry shelf, great. If you want to keep it in your freezer, great. It's not going to hurt anything. But thanks for coming along with us as we made our lard. I know I've got to have another bag of this someplace. We've got to have more. So if I can find that other bag, maybe we'll try one of the other ways of rendering down lard together that we had talked about before. Like I said, not everybody does it on the stovetop. Some people do it in a slow cooker or in a Nesco, or I've even heard of some people doing it in the oven. And I have never done that before, so maybe we could do that together. Maybe that would be fun. But thanks so much for joining us as we made our lard. We're going to go get these put away. Thanks for joining us in our kitchen, and we'll see you next time.